Okay, today I'll be looking at a Downwell Annie VOD review. Now, I get a lot of questions about this deck. Is it good? Yada yada yada. But the point of not all decks doesn't have to be that they're good, you know? Short answer, no. I don't believe Downwell Annie is a meta contender of a deck. However, I believe it's a B tier deck, which is still, playable and viable to play at a sort of local level or a casual level for fun and not feel like you're playing something horrific. That being said, the biggest question that I get with Downwell Annie is, how are you supposed to play the game if the Downwell loop doesn't work? Well, today I have a game playing against an Irelia. And this is very much a matchup where you cannot do the Downwell loop. If you try to do the Downwell loop, Irelia would just play a unit, ready the unit, and then she can just score the points regardless of what you're doing, right? The Downwell loop doesn't help in the slightest. So what are we trying to do in this matchup instead? Well, if we look at our mulligan, we see we have the Downwell and we have the Vi. None of these things matter. All we're going to try to do in this matchup is to abuse the fact that Irelia has a low unit count and just try to possess it over and over again. This obviously has, issues of its own, right? Like, what if they not so fast it? What if they have counters for it, etc., etc.? That is a problem, for sure. However, in a matchup like this, that is the only thing that we can do. So we're just going to try and hard look for possession, cast it as soon as possible, and keep casting as many times as possible for as many units as they have. So the whole plan right now, we're just trying to dig for what we have. We have the chest, we have the Ezreal, we're digging for cards. Next turn, we're looking at, pack. We can even Annie into the stack deck, or we can, do some more digging and ramping. All we want to do is try to find the possession. We have the possession now, so we're feeling in a fine position. Ezreal taking Reaver's Row here is just pretty solid. He just gets a point for free, basically. There's no harm to be done here. Next turn, we're already on possession mana. So next turn, we're probably just going to rip this possession no matter what. And if they have it, they have the answer, and we will just find another time to play a second possession later with our Annie recursion. That being said, we are taken by surprise with a second unit the Irelia is running. They play their Draven, which means that pushing this Ezreal ended up being a mistake. But there was very little way for me to know that to start with. So they're going to get an extra point from this Draven, which is not a huge deal at the end of the day. We're just going to play control and take over the game that way, instead of worrying about the point. This doesn't change our timer too much. It could potentially change it by one turn, because they go to 3 here, which is on parity for aspirants. But right now, we're just going to play the possession, hope it works out. We're going to take the Draven first, because he doesn't have the hidden card on him. That hidden card, if this hidden card is a fight or flight, and we use our possession on the Irelia and they fight or flight her back, it nullifies the possession entirely. So we're going to deal with this later, once we can get a better idea of what this hidden card is. Possessing the Draven here is guaranteed free, because he doesn't have mana for not so fast, and he doesn't have mana for hard bargain or anything like that. So this possession will always happen. We're very happy to see this. We just have to find a time to do it on the Irelia next. The deflect does make it so that we get off mana still, but we kind of expected that anyway, because we're going to play the possession onto the Irelia. So our mana is still getting really tough here. That being said, we've gotten the first possession off, so we're feeling pretty good. For the rest of this game, we're just going to try to get the next possession off to take the Irelia, and just make sure they have no units they can play. Sound like a broken record at this point, but that's the entire goal. This first game goes pretty much exactly as I've explained. We start ramping fully on this next turn, where we will just play out both of our packs, we draw cards, and we ramp and draw cards. That's all we need to do right now, because currently we are in the driver's seat, we're getting our engine rolling, we have the possessions ready. We're just going to bring the Ezreal back, and possess the Irelia next turn as well. And hopefully they don't have another answer, and if they do, then we just keep trying again and again. This game, it goes very well to plan. All of our possessions land exactly as they should, and we're able to get out a win by just completely out-attritioning the opponent. They have a Treasure Hunter in base with Zhonya's. We go for a Falling Star. If they have buffs for it, we can just play Annie and then Falling Star it again to make sure it dies. Our only goal right here is to make it die. I didn't expect them to have nothing here. Their hand must be incredibly bricked. But we go through our process and we get rid of them entirely of units. From this point on, our opponent had 0 units at all. So we have a free win for the game. We just play out everything until we get to final turn. I get a little bit overzealous. I just start flooding the board, which is still fine, right? Like, we don't have to play for recursion all the time in this deck. Sometimes we just have a good enough board that we can just start playing guys, which is what we're doing here with the Downwell stuff, right? We don't have the Downwell. We're not playing the Downwell. We're just throwing out all of our Rosses on the board, making our board state huge, and defending it with interaction that we have. And right now this is very strong. There's very little the opponent can do through anything here. They try to fight for it a little bit. They play a Treasure Hunter, and they have a few interaction pieces they can do to try and take it, but they can't get through both Incinerate and Foff. So the opponent loses this first game. You can see in the chat, I'm sort of helping my opponent through some of the more nuanced interactions with the game, like Reaver's Row is targeting my Irelia here, which then triggers her, and I don't have to go back with Reaver's Row to make Irelia 5 here, so that's what we were talking about there. And that math was enough to make this into a trade with the Incinerate, as they start playing more spells. So they do the Defiant Dance, and they play 2 on guards, and then I can Incin to make it a trade, and then finish it off with a Foff, and there's nothing more that they can do from this point on. This game went about as smooth as we could hope for against Irelia. So we're feeling pretty good going into the next 2 games. All we have to do is keep repeating that. We have way more chances for them to miss their answers to possession. We're going to the next game, and here's where we look at the sideboard for this. So when we're looking at the sideboard for Downwell Annie, what we're trying to do is, first thing we need to do is establish our win con. What is our win condition against the specific deck? Against Irelia, as I've mentioned, maybe about 50 times already, is that the win condition is possession. It is only possession. The Downwell will do nothing. So even though the deck's entire core concept is to recur Downwell over and over again, we're going to completely side that out for this matchup, because it will do nothing. We're going to get rid of it for another possession and add in a Ride the Wind. The Ride the Wind has become a tool that I'm using as a way to sort of play solo carry with Vi if I need to, which can sometimes be useful into this sort of matchup where we can leverage Vi over and over again with recurring Ride the Wind. Sometimes this comes up. It probably won't come up against Irelia, but it's a better tool to have than any of the other ones. Falling Star isn't really going to help too much, etc., etc. So here we go. We did see a 2-drop from Irelia, so we could have brought in maybe some more gusts. And then we look at our hand, and our hand looks pretty great right now. We have the tools that we need. The only thing we are missing, really, is a big draw engine. If we would find at least one stack deck from here, then we'd feel very confident, because then we would have, ways to be drawing our full deck. But we're fine with what we have right now. We just have to wait and get up to our possession time. So them playing the Treasure Hunter is not thrilling for us, but we have answers to it, so they can't score points at least. And then this goes pretty much as planned. The Irelia could be playing a little bit more aggressively into us, I think, where they are spending more. Like, they could probably even equip this GA to rush a point, and that might be a good play for them as well. So we draw into an Incinerate, which will help us to deal with this Treasure Hunter as we just keep getting ready for this final possession turn. So here we have a little bit of ordering that we can do, where we're going to start with Incinerate, so that if they try to buff it out of range, then we just gust it in response. Our opponent knows we have gust, so they know it's useless to play a buff, but this is still what is, preventing them from playing a buff. And if they want to use 2 buffs on it, then that's fine. Then that means that they probably can't get the second point. So either way, this Incin is saving us another turn. Now our hand is really light. This is not usually the position we want to be in. We do have the possession, but we don't have a trove to bounce back the Annie. We do have another Annie in our slot that we can be using. But what we really need to see is some way to keep recurring, some way to get more card draw into this engine. If we can find a stack deck, then we can play 2 more stack decks with the stack deck and then the Annie, try and find our pack, which will then just make our engine so much more complete. So we're feeling a little fragile right now. We're not at the mana. See, now they're doing the thing that I mentioned that they should have done, which is just being a lot more aggressive on taking points. So they are able to take this point, and we don't have a real answer for it, because our hand is 2 things. So now we're just going to hope and pray that we can find a way to ramp or to find our draw engine. We're going to skip through this. Alright. Skipping through talking some of the conversations. Now we have the hidden card again, which is always scary for us to see. Seeing the hidden card means that we can't really possess safely, because if it's a FOF, then it's sad. I think I played this game really poorly. I don't think this invert is that good to begin with. This invert looks very scary for me, because while it can get me my engine up and running, it also gets rid of this possession that we're going to want to use, like, next turn. So I feel like this invert ended up being a very scary decision. I don't know if this is correct. I don't think it is. I think we would rather just play out the Annie just to get something and then pass. And I think that's just a better way to play this turn. Our opponent ends up defying the invert, though, which does sort of make up for our own mistake. We feel pretty confident about that. And now here ends up being the biggest mistake of the game, which is this following turn for us. So on this next turn, we will have 8 mana, we have the possession, and our opponent has everything up, and 4 cards. What we need to do here is possess it. There are many answers that they could have to stop it, right? They could have a not so fast, they could have a flash, they could have a hard bargain. This hidden card could be FOF, right? There's so many answers that they can have to this possession, and it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, that's the only way that we can win the game. We don't make any progress by doing anything else, because this is the only card that we can play to progress the game. So we have to play it onto the Irelia, and then next turn we just get it back with the Annie, and just get back up the mana to the possession, and do it again. There's no reason to do anything else here. In this game, I end up just playing a called shot and passing. Just trying to find something, but in hindsight, there's really nothing here that will help. Like, what can I find? I can find my engine to keep ramping and make it easier to play back the possession each and every time, but that's still only delaying the game longer in a way that I can't handle. I need to put something on the board now to start clawing back this game, or else we will just lose. And that's exactly what ends up happening. This same turn cycle happens a few more turns, where my Irelia opponent has no incentive to leave, so they don't, and they stay there, and I keep dirtling around, doing effectively nothing on my turns, nothing useful to progress the game. Which just lets my Irelia opponent develop a Stellacorn, and now that they have this on the board, they can draw into so many more answers. So here, I try to go for the play once I see the Stellacorn on the board. I know that I have to do something, because if they just keep drawing, then they find more answers. I've already let them draw too many cards already by just letting the game happen. So we try to make a play here. We're going to buff up our Vi so that we hopefully force them to, have to, if this is a FOF, we force them to use it. We're pretty sure this is a FOF. So we're going to buff up our vibe so that we push it in so that hopefully that gets out this FOF. They get the Ravenbloom trigger, and then Disaster strikes, and the Ravenbloom trigger gives us a not so fast. So the Irelia now has a not so fast on this turn that we were hoping to play possession, and we will just lose the game from this point on. We delayed too much, we didn't hand check our opponent enough, and even if it was a FOF at the end of the day, and it would have still been better to play the possession on that earlier turn. So this one just kind of ended up being what it was. The Irelia ended up having the tools to deny our possession, and we delayed it too long. So we lose this one. There's nothing more that we can do for the rest of this game. All of our possessions are locked by this one not so fast, and we have not given ourselves enough time to play through it. So then we get into the final game. We do the same sideboard strategy, nothing really different. Here, we find another failure. This one is not necessarily a playline failure, but just what makes the deck tough. I think there was a moment here where I had a gust and I could have gusted the Stellacorn and I didn't. which probably is a mistake here. We're looking at our hand. We have invert, we have instant, and we have the call shot. The buff can help us to sort of deny them a point early, and this called shot is just going to... We don't need to spend the power because we're probably just going to play the invert because our hand looks really bad right now. So we're just going to keep the FOF that's potentially doing something, and we can toss away this called shot that won't do anything. Yeah, I probably would have done the opposite there. I don't think we needed to... We did not need to ship the FOF here, because the FOF is going to potentially do something if they play a turn 1 play, whereas this called shot's not going to do anything. Not like it hardly really matters, because at the end of the day, if there was a real world where I'm just playing the invert timelines here to begin with. So here is where I have a choice. And I think this is where I could have messed up. We have the Gust, which can deal with Stellarcorn, assuming they have no buffs in hand or no equipment that they put onto it. That does feel pretty risky. What I end up going for is just pack, invert, and then pack up the Trove, just to increase our engine and start getting some of the better cards. I think this is still the correct play. The Gust, while it looks like it can defend us from the Stellarcorn destroying infinite cards, any buff in their hand and the Gust is just gone. So the Gust is super flimsy here. Our whole hand looks pretty bad, so we invert it away. Notably, we have to put the pack on the board first, so that we don't invert the pack away. Seems a little obvious, but, you know, put your cards that are useful onto the board before you play the invert. So now we have our pack, we can get our Trove back, and we can start our engine going. We did not draw anything useful to deal with the Stella, and we're still 2 turns off of possession. That means that this Stella is going to draw a ton of cards to the opponent and find the answers that they need most likely. So we are heavily on the back foot now. They have many answers that they can probably have in their possession. Possession. And then we see a Sirens hit the board. So now they're drawing so many more cards every single turn, and we're very far behind. If our first possession can't land, it is very likely that none of our future possessions will land either. So we're going to try to just get as much as we can out on the board, get as much ramping happening to prepare us for the next possession, and pray that it hits. Since we have 2 seals, we're going to play both of them out, because that will give us more total power to play next turn than it does right now. Whereas we would have to... We would essentially come up with 2 power next turn. We paid 1 power for 2 power. Whereas in the following turn, we'd have to pay 1 power for 2 power. You know what? The math is starting to lose it on me. Either way, this is more total power that we'll be getting. So we see the boots. I thought about foffing here, just so that they didn't get the point. But then it's like, okay, if I foff it, then they draw more cards, and it's not on the battlefield to possess it with. So it gets real tough. We can potentially, like, foff it to force them to play something to ready it so that it goes back on, and then they just draw, like, 4 more cards this turn. All of it looks pretty bad for us right now. So we're going to just leave it. We're just going to let it stay there, and hopefully it stays on the battlefield, and they have nothing to protect it with for this possession that we're going to play. That's the hope. That's the dream. Doubt it will come to fruition, but that's what we're going to play for. So they do end up using Sirens on it. But they end up readying it, which is good. So they do end up readying it. And I talked to my opponent about them readying it after the draw. The way Irelia works is that the trigger happens on top of the effect. So Irelia Blade Dancer will resolve before the effect of, Siren or Stellarcorn's movement. So where my opponent used Sirens, moved it back, drew a card, and then readied. And this all, sort of doesn't matter in the grand scheme of this game, right? Because none of it's changing the, actions that we're taking. But it's always just good to keep in mind the proper order of things are happening. Like how you should recycle the cards off Stuck Duck. Things like that. So nothing too harsh for the opponent here. This is just small reminders. So I end up pushing onto the paper tree, which is good for us. This means that we can try to get a possession off onto it. We hope that they play more things here, so that we just have less possible cards at hand to deal with, but it's pretty tough. So we come to this next following turn, and our possession... Oh, hold on. I'm just gonna do everything. Yep. So now the only thing we can do here is play the possession. We can't really bait anything out, because if we try to FOF them, like, the FOF is good for them, so they'll just let it, right? There's no reason for them to try to not so fast a FOF anyway. So we just rip the possession and hope something good comes out of it. We rip the possession, and they have the not so fast. And this doesn't immediately end the game for us. We're still pretty okay. We can still get it back next turn. We'll be on 10. And so next turn we can play the Annie and play another possession to try and deal with the problem. And they're not winning in 2 turns, so we still have time. That being said, if we have another one that gets cancelled in the same way, now we're in a big problem. So we got rid of one answer. My opponent puts everything in base, which is pretty bad for us, because now we have no way to interact with them. We would love to play Annie and get back the possession and steal something here, but there's just nothing we can really be doing here. So we're going to try to just do what we can, which is like Falling Star the Stellacorn, get out something, potentially. But from here, not much in our realm that we can do. We can also just get back the possession to play it on their turn, so that way we're at least using as much energy as humanly possible. And I think that's what I end up going for here, is getting back the possession and then just holding up the possession into their turn. Yeah. Which looks pretty good. Doing this, that way we can take something and they have to defy it on their turn, and then we can play something else onto our turn as well. So this makes the most sense to do. We play Treasure Trove just to make sure that our runes end up still being correct at the end of the day. We have put ourselves in a position where if we didn't use this seal for Annie... Does that work the way that I think it does? We do this... Then we can... No, it's all the same. It actually ends up the exact same. I was thinking if we play Annie, spending the seal, and then we bring this... Oh no, because we can bounce it. Yeah. So the mistake here, I played the Annie. I should have just paid the Annie for a purple power. That way we can just trove our... pack our trove. That way we can get the power back, and that way we have both of our seals up, and still we have our 12 runes. That way our possession onto the Irelia this next turn ends up being neutral in runes going into our next turn. So we'll still have 12 runes going to next turn, even if we possess the deflect unit. But I messed that up, so this is a learning moment where we can just spend the power on the Annie and then get back the rune with the pack and the trove. So this was a mistake and meant that I didn't really want to possess the Irelia into the following turn. And I was talking about this with my opponent, that I messed up here. Because I take these games, not very seriously at all. These are mostly just, practice games. This is still on the ranked ladder for the Runes and Rift. So it's while the games have slightly more weight than a very casual game, it's still very much just, me and my opponent playing together. So, not a big deal to talk about mistakes and things with the opponent, at least not to me. So as I was saying, because we messed up our power resource, we now don't want to possess this Irelia, because this will put us at 11 runes into next turn, which means that we can't Annie possess then as well. So we're going to have to just hope that our opponent misplays by bringing the Stellacorn onto Obelisk. They have no need to do that, because all they have to do is, double score next turn, and they'll win. So putting the Stellacorn into sort of harm's way here doesn't really achieve anything for them. But we do get to play it, so this is good for us, and we end up still going to 10. The next turn will be on 12, so happy for us so far. We just have to hope they don't have an answer. And of course they do have an answer. They're playing Flash. This will avoid the battlefield targeting of possession, so the Stellacorn does not get possessed here. And we're pretty much cooked here. There's very little we can do here. Our only hope is to, find a Vi, and then play... find some way to clear the board with Vi. Which, with 2 hidden cards, or a hidden card and one's Azonia's, and they hide another card on this turn, it's pretty much impossible to get anything done. But we're going to try. We do draw the Vi miraculously, so we do what we can. Okay, now that my dog is done trying to murder the mailman, there's very little we can do on this spot. We packed up a treasure trove, and we're going to play the Vi and just do what we can. There's basically nothing that we can be doing. So, here we go. We're going to play the Vi, we're going to go through it all, and they're going to use all their reaction spells, their Fofs on the hidden, and we will lose the game. So while we did end up losing these games, there were still a lot of decisions being made here that were not as optimized as they could be. And I think that's what's so exciting for this deck for me, is that we're thinking about the game in a very different way. And even if we're not going for Downwell recursion lock, we still have playlines, right? Downwell is not the end-all be-all of the deck. Even when we saw in the first game, we could just build a board too, right? Once we have cleared the board, we can just build a board of our own and hold up interaction pieces. There's a lot more ways to play this deck than what initially meets the eye. I hope that this served to sort of illuminate some of the thought process for the deck. I know this was a very unorthodox game for the deck, but that's good, because all I've shown so far of the deck is it being able to do its Downwell loop, and it's succeeding at that. So this here is showing a different way to play the deck, and while it still loses, this is still different play patterns than what would meet the eye. So, I hope this helped. I hope this is fun. I'm still enjoying playing Downwell Annie a ton. It is my favorite deck to be playing. It's not the most competitive deck, and not what I'll be taking to Vegas, but I've been enjoying it a lot, and I hope you guys do too.